concludes oral questions today. Private notice question on the UK's contribution to eliminating HIV/AIDS. Lord Fowler.
My Lords, I beg leave to ask the question of which I've given private notice, namely to ask His Majesty's Government, in the light of World AIDS Day today and the estimated 650,000 annual deaths worldwide from HIV/AIDS, what plans they have to increase their contribution to eliminating the disease. My Lords, is not the tragedy that although we now have all the means to eliminate AIDS, unlike the time when I was a minister, yet the annual figures still show worldwide this figure of 650,000 deaths, including, very significantly, over 200,000 deaths of women, and worst of all, 100,000 deaths of children. In the light of this continuing emergency, how can it be justified that the government has cut back the resources they are devoting to fighting this disease, and will they now reconsider that policy?
My Lords, the UK is committed to working in partnership to deliver on the global AIDS strategy and ending the epidemic of AIDS by the end of this decade. This is evidenced by our recent pledge of £1 billion to the Global Fund, and this funding will help to provide antiretroviral therapy for 1.8 million people. The UK also provides substantial funding to the World Health Organization and UNAIDS, and supports countries to strengthen their health systems. Together, we're working towards ensuring that all can access the prevention and treatment services needed to make progress on HIV and AIDS.
I echo the words of the noble Lord Fowler. 38.4 million people globally are living with HIV in 2021. And as we have seen with other pandemics, an infection in one country ultimately affects us all. So therefore, it's in our national interest that we increase funding to the Global Fund fighting AIDS, HIV and malaria. But, my Lords, globally and nationally, we have seen incredible advances in tackling HIV. Central to these benefits is empowering individuals to test, take control and therefore live a healthy life with HIV-positive status. So I ask the noble Lord the Minister, will the government commit to widening the prescribing of PrEP beyond sexual health clinics to pharmacies, general practitioners, community and maternity services? PrEP is part of the armoury that prevents transmission. My Lords, we have the tools, but they are useless if they are not widely accessible.
My Lords, the UK met the UNAIDS 95 targets for the first time 2 years ago in 2020. 95% of HIV-positive individuals were diagnosed. 99% of those people who were diagnosed were receiving treatment, and 97% of those receiving treatment were being virally suppressed. I very much note the suggestion by the noble Lord about increasing availability of PrEP, and that is a message which I'll convey to the health service.
My Lords, there are concerns that a fall in HIV testing levels during the pandemic may hamper the government's efforts to eliminate HIV transmission in England by 2030. Does the Minister share those concerns, and will the government be taking extra measures to increase testing levels again?
Yeah.
My Lords, I don't have specific figures in relation to the rate of testing during the pandemic, I'm afraid. If they exist, I'll certainly make sure they're made available. But I can absolutely say that the UK remains completely committed to the global goal of achieving zero new HIV transmissions by 2030. And as a nation, we've made big progress, which as I relayed in my previous answer, domestically, but internationally, we remain one of the main funders and supporters of action to tackle HIV/AIDS.
Will the noble Lord, my Lord, will the noble Lord take up the powerful point made by Lord Cashman that in the domestic UK context, women are losing out on getting treatments, including PrEP? There's very low take-up. And will he speak to his colleagues in the Department of Health about that?
But it's certainly the case globally that women with HIV have some of the highest maternal death rates, which is why our Ending Preventable Deaths approach, which is a major focus of UK ODA, has a strong rights and equality focus and will remain a priority for the UK. In the UK context, I'll certainly convey that suggestion to the Department for Health.
I welcome the government's recent commitment of £1 billion to the Global Fund, which in the circumstances fiscally here in the UK is a remarkable and generous donation and makes us one of the best contributors still in the world to this important fund. Of these 650,000 deaths from AIDS every year globally, to which my noble friend Lord Fowler referred, some third are from tuberculosis. Tuberculosis is the biggest single cause of death of people who have HIV, and co-infection, the two diseases, remains a serious problem. Does my noble friend recognise the importance of tackling both major epidemics, tuberculosis and HIV, together, and that commitment will continue to be important if we are to have some chance of beating these diseases? There is no chance of beating them, TB, by 2030, but at least within the lifetime of a generation.
I first thank the noble Lord for his comments about our contribution to the Global Fund, and I agree with him. I mean, in the face of the pressures that we're facing, budgetary pressures, I was very relieved and pleased that we were able to make that commitment to the Global Fund, which is doing extraordinarily important work. The noble Lord also makes an important point about TB. And it is the case that until just a few years ago, the trajectory for TB was very much downwards. And it was one of those historic illnesses which we had almost got to grips with, and certainly believed we were getting to grips with. And one of the problems is that we are seeing the weakening of the effectiveness of antibiotics. And there is currently a limited supply of antibiotics. And if we continue to abuse them, as we are globally, well over half of the world's antibiotics are used just to keep animals alive in factory farm conditions, conditions in which they would not otherwise survive. And it just seems to me to be the height of irresponsibility to be wasting this this treasure, antibiotics, this miracle cure, which our ancestors would have dreamt of, in order just to get animals a bit fatter, a bit quicker, and keep them alive in conditions that we shouldn't be keeping them in any case. So this is a priority. The UK is leading this issue and is doing extraordinarily important work on it. And I don't think we can solve the problem that the noble Lord raised unless we get to grips with our abuse of antibiotics.
I think the noble Lord, the Ministry, is allowing his other passions to slip into the answer here, and well done on doing that. And can I also commend noble Lord Fowler for his absolute consistency and championing of this issue. My Lords, the role of UNAIDS is crucial for making progress in the global fight against HIV and AIDS, but they are now facing a severe shortfall in their operating budget. So what steps will the government take to support UNAIDS in building its capacity? And second, on the domestic front, my Lords, it seems that the law really needs to keep up with the science, which I think has been referred to already. And in recognition of this today, the Labour Party is supporting people with HIV that they should have equal access to fertility treatments. Does the noble Lord agree that this is important, and how can he help to take it forward?
Yeah. I echo the Noble Baroness's remarks in relation to Noble Lord Fowler, who has a long and distinguished record of championing this issue and is widely respected for having done so. The Noble Baroness asked about UNAIDS, and of course the UK is completely committed to UNAIDS. We will continue to work to ensure that UNAIDS leads the implementation of the ambitious new global AIDS strategy for 2021 to 2026 at the UN high-level meeting on HIV in June last year. The UK was at the forefront of working to secure the highest level of commitment from our global partners so that the world has the best chance of meeting those 2030 goals to end AIDS. And on the domestic question, I'm afraid I'm not qualified to answer that question, but I instinctively agree with the premise of the question put to me by the Noble Baroness, and I'll make sure that the Department for Health has a look at it.
My Lords, in sub-Saharan Africa, adolescent girls and young women are 3 times more likely to acquire HIV than adolescent boys and men. Can the Noble Lord the Minister say what's being done to fund programmes which help keep girls in education, which we know reduces their vulnerability to HIV by up to 50%?
Noble Baroness is right, the Right Reverend Prelate is right. We continue to support stronger health systems around the world more broadly, because that in turn helps end AIDS-related deaths and prevent new HIV infections. I said earlier that women with HIV have the highest maternal death rates, which is why our ending the preventable deaths approach remains a priority for the UK. On education, I mean, education has been now for some years, particularly education of women and girls, a top priority as enshrined in the integrated view, but also the international development strategy. And it remains a priority, and it will remain a priority.
My Lords, what are the key challenges for the UK to meet the target of eliminating HIV by transmission of HIV by 2030? Is the elimination of undiagnosed cases, which currently, out of the 107,000 total cases, probably are around 5,000. How does the government intend to tackle that?
Well, my Lords, much of our work that we support is through the multilateral system. We were talking earlier about the Global Fund, and increasing diagnosis rates remains a key priority for not just the Global Fund, but other multilateral organs as well. So through our support for those institutions, we are in turn supporting increased and escalated efforts to boost diagnosis rates.
My Lord, would the government give some new publicity on the importance of prevention of HIV and AIDS? Some people think it has gone away. My Lords, we have heard clear and loud today, it has not gone away.
I think, look, it's certainly right that here in the UK we have seen remarkable progress, and I think people in the UK can take comfort from the figures that I cited right at the beginning of this exchange. But that is not true internationally, as we heard from the Noble Lord Fowler, where the numbers are really shocking, 650,000 annual deaths. So prevention has to be, as it is with all preventable diseases, has to be a key priority. And I hope my answer just 2 questions ago in relation to prevention of early deaths, particularly among women and girls, will have provided some reassurance to the Noble Baroness.
I want to refer to your response to Lord Cashman's question about the availability of PrEP beyond sexual health clinics. It's really important, my Lords, that it is more universally available. But I want to ask a second question. Are we helping other countries to have access to PrEP, particularly some of the women and children in Africa that the Right Reverend Prelate referred to earlier on?
The wider availability of PrEP is an issue that I know the government is working on. I don't belong to the relevant department, so I can't provide authoritative figures. But the case is bulletproof, and I know that is a view that's shared by colleagues across government. But I'm going to have to provide, via them, a more updated response to that, I'm afraid. And in terms of the international rollout and availability of PrEP, I believe that is something that the Global Fund is also doing. The Global Fund is the main vehicle that we use. It's therefore the main vehicle we support, which is why our commitment of £1 billion is so welcome. But all of that work is through those multilateral institutions.
Will the Minister perhaps remind the current Chancellor of the Exchequer that as a newly elected MP and a member of the International Development Committee, he led a campaign to ensure that the UK set annual targets, monitored them and delivered retrovirals across the developing world. Will he remind the Chancellor of the Exchequer of his commitment and suggest he repeats it now?
My honourable friend, the Chancellor, has long championed, been a champion of UK aid, and I very much hope that as a consequence, in his current capacity, he will be able to do more than that. I hope he'll be able to return us as quickly as possible, as soon as the fiscal situation allows, to the 0.7. The 0.5, it still makes us one of the most generous countries in the world, but it also inhibits some of the areas where we showed real leadership in the years up to that decrease. So I have every confidence that the Chancellor will wish to do everything he can in his current post to bolster our position of global leadership through our deployment of aid, and part of that, of course, is having rigorous targets and ensuring that we have value for money.
My Lords, isn't one of the major issues around HIV is the stigma attached to people who are HIV positive? It's not widely understood, but with effective treatment, viral load can be undetectable, and those people cannot transmit the virus to other people. What is the government doing, both in the UK and globally, to reduce the stigma associated with HIV?
Yeah. The noble Lord makes an important point, and he too has been a vocal champion, both in the domestic context and beyond. But the UK itself, as a country, is a champion of human rights around the world, and we're committed to the principle of non-discrimination on any grounds, including on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity, the issues which are often conflated with the issue that we're discussing today. And the noble Lord is absolutely right to point to the stigma associated with HIV/AIDS, but he also, his point will have been recorded for posterity, that around the facts of the issue, the facts of the efficacy of current treatments, and the removal of danger that results in.
My Lords, the time allowed for this question has now elapsed.